All right. Hey,
Hey.
Dr. Hidalgo, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. And this is another great edition of 8 Minutes in College. We're going to go ahead and interview Dr. Lani Hidalgo from the CPC department at the University of Arizona. And I'm so thrilled to have worked with her, but I'm even more thrilled to be able to talk to her today because I think this is going to be such great value for you all.
Thanks for
So
having me.
absolutely. So the first question I wanted to ask, if I could please, is one of the reasons why I wanted to chat with you specifically and what I love about your really awesome background here is it's so diverse and you've done so much in your life. Really, it's really amazing actually. And so the reason why I find it so cool though is also because I think when students think of college professors, they don't typically think of someone who has like the wonderfully varied interests that you do. And it's also why I think you connect with students so well too. And having been in the classroom, I can I see the connection. It's just amazing to me. And they respond to you so well. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you became a PhD and started teaching?
Yeah, sure. I actually probably could have, if they had this award in high school, I think they would have given it to me, which is most likely to not do anything with their life. I am really, really dyslexic. So I found school to be very difficult. And in high school, I'm all throughout, but especially high school, I just kind of gave up on things. Never took chemistry in high school at all because I didn't score high enough or whatever. But I did graduate and took some years off and decided I was ready to go back to college and I wanted to be a physical therapist because I did a lot of running at the time. I'm still super active, but at the time it was all long distance running. I injured myself so many times. I saw a physical therapist all the time. So I thought, this is what I want to do with my life. And I hated anatomy and physiology more than I can explain. But I fell in love with Gen Chem, which I was probably the very last class I wanted to take. I was terrified of it. But I loved it. Everybody who I was in it with said, you like this way more than anybody else. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is the coolest stuff ever. You guys don't just study on your own because you think it's cool. And they're like, no, I don't. We really don't. So I decided, you know what, why don't I take organic chemistry? It wasn't part of the physical therapy track, but since I hated anatomy and physiology so much, I loved chemistry, I thought, why don't I just take it and see what happens? And I had a great professor, and I just really felt that organic chemistry was where science and art kind of came together in this nice little mesh. And I really loved it and decided, okay, I'm going to switch majors to chemistry, despite the math, despite the dyslexia. I'm going to put in the work. And I was terrified I wasn't going to be able to do it, but I just buckled down and did the work. I think it's kind of one of those things where if you want it bad enough, you'll do what it takes. And that was definitely what happened for me as an undergraduate. And then I ended up graduating magna cum laude from University of Washington. So it was worth the effort. And as I moved up in chemistry, I fell in love with it more and more, especially electrons. So I decided,
They're amazing. I love
they
electrons.
electrons are the coolest. It was Linus Pauling's Nature of the Chemical Bond that just completely threw me over the loop. I'm like, okay, that's it. I just think this is really cool. But I went into the industry right away and did not think about graduate school. But I quickly realized to have a bachelor's degree in chemistry basically means you can get a chemistry job where you wonder why you need a degree to do it, because you're just kind of pushing buttons and not really using your background too much. So it was with that I decided, all right, I'm going to get my PhD. So I came into school, University of Arizona, was 100% set on being a lab rat and working in the industry and making mad amounts of money. The last thing I wanted to do was teach the labs, but I had to as part of, how we paid for school type of thing. And it was doing that that I absolutely fell in love with teaching. So I followed my heart to chemistry, and I followed my heart into the classroom, and I took a big pay cut that I would have had if I had gone into the industry, but I have no regrets. I do not hate Mondays. I wake up feeling like I get to teach today, and that means a lot more to me than a paycheck does. So
I
that's,
love that passion. I love
yeah.
that.
Well, and that's my big message to my students. Like, you might come in with one idea, but follow your heart and be brave enough to take that step, because you're not going to regret it in the end. And we're going to spend most of our lives working. So why not do something you actually like, instead of, you have this perception of what it's like to be a doctor, say when you're 5, and then you get into college and you're like, ooh, this isn't at all what I thought it was, but you decide you're going to stick with it anyway, and then kind of hate every Monday of your life. And yeah, you have good money, but who cares if you just loathe every minute of your working life? It just isn't worth it.
Yeah, I think the up and coming generations are so right when they're kind of gearing things towards more like, what are you passionate about? What do you actually love to do? And then finding a way to make money at that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's great. But you also have to get your education to do these kinds of things, like in chemistry and everything. So that's the fantastic thing, is that you can go back and do anything at any time if you want to. You can go back and get an education as well if you decide your passion has changed.
Yeah, you absolutely can. And I used to think, oh, university is just a business and they make us take all these electives because they just want our money. But if I never had to take electives, I never would have taken chemistry, and I never would have found myself in where I am right now. And I'm so happy with my life. So, and I remember taking women's studies because I thought it would be easy and I just needed another general elective. It was not easy. It ended up changing my perception of life. And I just am a big proponent now of taking as many diverse classes as you can to expose yourself so that you can find what you love and then follow that, So I know general electives are a bummer for those in college, but they're worth it. Take them.
They are worth it, definitely. I totally agree. So obviously, I'm trying to bring some helpful content to first generation college students, right? So I'm curious from your perspective as a professor. I'm just kind of curious about this. If you feel like you can kind of spot first generation college students when they're in your class, like, do you see a certain like deer in the headlights kind of look on their face, and that maybe tells you that they're a little unfamiliar with college territory or may need some help? Or is it a little hard with the volume of students that you see?
It's hard with the volume of students I see. And the other thing too is a lot of the students that I have, so my class is 600 people. My learning team typically has around 50 to 60. And what I hear from most of my students is either the class itself is larger than their entire senior graduating class. So that in and of itself is crazy, even if they're not a first generation college student. Most of them sat in a classroom with fewer students than my learning team is. And so, it's just a very different experience. So I feel like almost everybody looks like a deer in headlights if they're a freshman in my class, especially for a variety of reasons. But I will say it's funny that you asked this, because I just got an email today from somebody who was a student on my learning team asking for a letter of rec to go to medical school. And she said in that email that she was a first generation college student. And I never would have guessed. It just didn't occur to me to have that sort of perception of her, that oh yeah, clearly you're first generation. And one of my other learning team members was also a first generation college student. And he ended up graduating top of his class this last year. Was just amazing. So I would honestly say that probably one of the telltale signs is how motivated they are. I think first generation college students are more motivated than people who just feel like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. My family did this and I'm supposed to take this next step and go to college, but have no real passion for it. So I think if I see a big passion in a student, and a freshman especially, most likely they are first generation and just so grateful to be here, so happy to have the opportunity, and just ready to take full advantage of it. And of course, that's the type of student I absolutely love. So I think
Yeah.
that's really the big drive that would be the standout for me.
Yeah, it touches your heart when you see that kind of drive in a student. It really does. I can remember, you can kind of spot those students, the ones that are going to like do everything they can to do well in your class, and it's just amazing to see.
Yeah,
Yeah, you love it. You love seeing that. So
I love it. The growth minded attitude. Absolutely.
yes, yes. So you've been teaching for a while now, and probably seen, I would imagine, literally thousands of students, right? Um,
Yes.
so you've probably seen a lot of success and struggles amongst students, right? So what, in your opinion, are some of the characteristics that you've seen help students succeed? And what's a major kind of no-no, for lack of a better word, that holds students back from doing well?
The having a fixed minded attitude. Well, I did poorly on this exam, so clearly I'm screwed and I'm never going to be able to be a chemist and I'm in a failure class.
Mm,
That right away is not the mindset that is going to allow for success or opportunity. That's the mindset of, well, it doesn't come easily, so I'm done and I'm clearly too stupid, which is
mm,
just not the case. The most important thing that I see is the growth minded mindset that, okay, I didn't do well on this exam. What did I do wrong so I don't do that again? And how did I prepare for this exam so that I prepare differently that will hopefully allow me to be more apt to answer the questions with the knowledge that I have?
yeah,
That is wholeheartedly the key to success, is just being able to say, all right, well, this did not go my way. Maybe cry some tears for 5 minutes, dust yourself off, and just get back to it with a different game plan and reassess what you did and why you wouldn't do that again. Those types of things. If you can have that attitude, you will succeed in whatever it is that you put your mind to. So, and that's constantly what I'm trying to preach to my students, because so many of them studied an hour a week in high school and got straight A's or were valedictorian and are suddenly realizing that's not going to fly in college. And they can either say, well, that's it. Like, clearly I'm too stupid. If I was able to do this in high school, I can't do it now. Or recognize, okay, I'm in a different league and I need to step up to the plate and I am going to struggle, but that's okay. That's you can conquer the world if that's your attitude. So that's
absolutely.
constantly what I'm just trying to drive into my students. Like, you got 5 exams. Oh, well, one didn't go your way. What are you going to do to make the other 4 just annihilate them? And some people are just seem unable to believe in themselves enough to have that growth minded attitude. And it's that I'd love to instill in every single one of my students, is just that belief in themselves. So, like, okay, I'm struggling, but that does not define me. My perseverance through this struggle, that's what's going to define me. So I'm going to make it no matter what.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think when you've had learning difficulties too, I think you kind of cultivate that a little bit more as well. You know, you
Absolutely.
because you can't go through life without being able to read. You can't go through life without being able to do basic math. And my problem was always math personally. But so you have to learn how to do these things, and you also have to learn how to reach out for help. You have
Yes, that's a very good point. Whether it's to
it's
your peers or to your instructors. And some of that's pushing an ego aside, which can be very difficult for an 18-year-old mindset.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean, because at 18, don't you know it all?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everything and nothing all at the same time.
Right, right, exactly. And that's actually a good segue into to kind of the last question here that I wanted to ask you is, I am absolutely a big proponent of going to office hours. Right? Yeah, I think it's an amazing opportunity. When I was actually taking the freshman chemistry course at the U of A, they didn't have office hours for TAs, and I would have loved that. I would have loved to have been able to like go in and talk about the lab and get a little more information and everything. So I think the fact that TAs and professors are doing office hours now is just like mind-blowingly great. But I also feel like you've got to go in prepared with specific questions or like a goal in your learning when you go to office hours. Like, what am I going to get out of this time with my professor and TA? So if a student comes to your office hours, what are some of the things you feel like they need to know to get the best out of that time with you? Because everybody's time is limited. So it's a matter of like, how do you use that time the best?
So you hit the nail on the head, in my opinion, which is coming with prepared questions. I'll get students who come into my office hours who kind of just expect a crib note of the last month and, like just lay it on me. And I'm just like, I can't do that, One thing that I have learned is if I say to a student, oh, you remember that slide or that activity we did in class? And they go, oh yeah, I remember that. And they can pull it up on their laptop or have a printout of it and recollect what I'm talking about. I can pretty much guarantee that they're going to get an A. Like, okay, you have come in, you've looked at this material, you know the notes, you have prepared questions that come from a hole in your understanding of the material. You're going to be just fine if you keep going at this. If I have that same question, I say, oh, remember, and they're just like, oh, I don't know. So, question in lecture, I am pretty sure that they're not going to be successful in my class, at least if they continue on that same sort of trajectory. That to me is the biggest telltale sign. And that's what I tell my students. If you don't know the notes well, then you don't know the material as well as you may feel you have the competence in it. So I think that's really looking at the notes, looking at the problems we've done. Here are my specific questions that, like, showing that they've put the time in on their own and struggled through it, have gotten to a place where they no longer are able to proceed, and now have very clear-cut questions about the material in order how to like get past that hump that they're unable to get through. Those are by far the most productive office hour moments. And I'm constantly telling my students, my goal is to get you, like, I know that this isn't your only class. I know you're all overwhelmed with things and you only have a set amount of time to spend on the material. And my goal is to teach them how to use that time in what I call study with purpose. So you can't just go and have your notes open and be like reading through things and like do a couple problems and okay, and think that you're going to know anything. Even if you do that for 10 hours in the library, you're not going to get anywhere. And if you don't pay attention in class and sort of get those holes in concepts cleared up before you leave the room, then you're going to struggle through those concepts while you're studying and create an incredibly frustrating experience for yourself. So that's why I have the learning team, and I tell my class, like, you do the problems, you ask the questions while you're here, so that, as I say, when you go off into the wild to do chemistry on your own, you can do it with purpose, because you've kind of those big questions you've been able to clear up, and now you're going to work through those itty bitty details on your own the way you need to process it to have your understanding solidified for success. So it's so important to have some sort of preparation. And the best way to annoy your instructor, in my opinion, is to ask for a crib note of lectures. Like, oh, we have an exam next week. So like, if you could just really quick fill me in on the highlights, like, that's right away. I'm just like, I want you to leave my office. I don't say that, but that's always what I'm thinking.
I always love it when students come up to you and they're like, I don't know how to do this.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, exactly. It just shows that there was no real effort put on their part. Like, there has to be that individual struggle. And so to have some sort of, something that shows that they individually struggled before coming in, then we will have a productive conversation for sure.
I love that. Okay. So Dr. Hidalgo, thank you so much for doing this for me. I really appreciate it. And
thank you for asking.
And I definitely want to keep in touch with you. So again, thank you so much.
Absolutely. I love what you're doing. This is such a good project. So I'm just really happy to be part of it. Thank you again.
Thank you.